Okay. Well, today I'm here with Park Rapids varsity hockey coach Bill Moore. And Bill, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So Bill's a lifelong hockey man. His playing career, now correct me if I get any of this wrong, but I think this is basically it, that he played at Woodbury High School and then in college at St. Mary's in Winona.
That is correct.
As far as coaching goes, Bill had coached the Tartan High School. Well, where is that, by the way?
Tartan is in Oakdale, Minnesota. It's just on the east side of St. Paul. It's a border city of Woodbury.
Okay, so Oakdale, yeah. So Tartan High School. Then he coached at went back to his alma mater, St. Mary's, and coached there for a little while. Went back then to his other alma mater, high school, Woodbury, where he was the head coach. And was also the head coach at South St. Paul as well.
That is correct.
On the varsity level. And after that, he took over at the collegiate level at St. Mary's in Winona and was the head coach there for 12 years, from 2007 to 2019. And then he's another one of these guys who came up to Park Rapids to quote-unquote retire, which is what we found out, that a lot of people who come to Park Rapids to retire don't actually retire.
So you should say that again.
And became the head coach of the Boys Varsity hockey team here in 2021. Mm-hmm. So Bill brings a lifetime of hockey experience to our community and has done so since 2021. And he's seeking to improve the hockey program in the area and to have another winning season for the Park Rapids Panthers.
Absolutely, and the kids are great here. The community has been very welcoming, and I couldn't be happier up here.
Great. Well, we're so glad to have you here to develop our hockey in this area, because hockey is such an important part, I think, of the fabric of Minnesota.
Well, and especially up here in the north, you figure the Section 8 where you got War Road, Roseau. Park Rapids used to compete with them, in the mid-'90s very well. And, we've just gotten a little bit small. Now we just got to build up our size a little bit to get the skill level up.
And so I do want to talk to you about those programs, actually, as we go a little further. But before we get there, I wanted to talk to you about your playing days.
Sure.
So when did you first start playing hockey? How old were you?
Oh, I think I was about 7 years old. We started when we moved from St. Paul. We lived in downtown St. Paul when I was a real little kid. My mom and dad moved us out of there to Woodbury when I was about 6. Yeah. And the following year, we enrolled in hockey, and my mom and dad knew nothing about it. It was back when Woodbury was only 8,000 people, so it was really community-like, just like up here. And it was funny because you just trade off with the parents on who's driving who this week. Everybody jump in the station wagon, and we'd get off to hockey and skate outside most of the time. But it was fun, and it built the love of the game for me.
Now, I think that's a very common experience for a lot of people when they got into hockey, especially, I know that was, for my background. When I first started playing hockey, I was in Duluth, and they had the neighborhood associations. They still do.
Yes, they do.
In Duluth Area Hockey Association. I had gone to elementary school at Congdon Park, and we actually had a pretty, there was 2 hockey rinks and then a larger skating area right there behind the elementary school. So it was real easy to access. I think even at recess and after school, sometimes if it wasn't too dark, but certainly on weekends, there would be pickup games going. Yep. They had a warming shack there that was sponsored by the parents. Is that sort of the kind of thing that we're talking about that they had in Woodbury?
Absolutely. And we had 3 distinct neighborhoods in Woodbury at that time, and each had their own rink. And so we had ours down there, and, the 5 or 6 parents that had kids playing hockey would shovel the rink and flood the rink, and we'd be down there playing, and one of the moms would come down with sandwiches for us at lunchtime and things like that. And it was no big deal, not like today where you're a little bit afraid to send your kid away from the house to the rink by themselves. Just things were a lot different back when we were kids.
It's funny you mentioned that. It's such a different time, because that wouldn't have even been a consideration.
No, I know. And I mean, it wasn't like the rink was across the street. We had to go 4 or 5 blocks from home and just by ourselves, and we'd be down there for 5, 6, 7 hours. And
no cell phone.
No cell phone. And And nobody worried a bit about it, you know. If you didn't get home for dinner, you had to warm it up yourself. That was all there was.
Yeah, yeah. And I think those are sort of the times where the places where the real hockey skills start to develop.
For sure. And I think it's funny. Everybody's so worried in today's world about an 8-year-old being out on the ice with a 14-year-old. And that's the way we all grew up.
Yeah.
That's the way the 8-year-olds learned to compete. That's the way the 8-year-olds learned to work. Because if they didn't get the respect of the 14-year-olds, they were never going to see the puck.
Right.
You know, you had to work to try to get it away from them. You had to work on your stick handling to show you could beat somebody. If they didn't think you could play, they never passed you the puck. You'd just be skating up and down the ice.
Yeah. And that's probably how a lot of young players first start to get recognized as sort of separating themselves from others, is that they're able to play with guys that are older than them.
No doubt about it. And I think, you know, at least with me growing up, is I looked at the older kids and I wanted to be just like them, you know, and they were, I won't say they were my idols, but they were kind of the mentors in the game of hockey. And my mom and dad were extremely supportive, driving us wherever we had to go to play, but neither one of them had ever played before. So they had no way of teaching us and coaching us how to play. Yep. So we needed to learn from the other kids that were playing. We needed to learn from the adults that did play. It was a blast.
Yeah. And now, in those days, because I'm just going to go from my own personal experience. There was sort of like the rec teams, and then there were the traveling teams. Was that something that existed back then, or was it mainly just, it was all just sort of one team that was?
Nope, it existed back then.
Yep.
We were lucky enough to play on the traveling teams. Woodbury was small though, so we didn't have an A team at that time. The highest level that we could support was a B team. So we played B level hockey all the way up until high school. And then as Woodbury got older and bigger, they were able to field an A team. And now they've got double A and 2 or 3 A teams and 7 B teams. It's ridiculous. But we started out playing traveling, but there was also in-house hockey if you wanted to do that.
Yeah. And for those who don't really understand what that is, the traveling thing, you talk about a parental commitment. I mean, that is a huge commitment, because not only are there practices all throughout the week, but then just about every weekend you're going somewhere for a tournament.
Well, and up here it's even more of a commitment, because like when we were at Woodbury, we had 5 other towns within 15 minutes of us. I think when I was coaching high school at Woodbury, we counted there were 19 ice rinks within 20 minutes of where we practiced. You get there, it's no big deal. If you're going here, like yesterday, we went to Red Lake Falls for scrimmages. That was 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
It was a good trip.
Yeah. I mean, you think about that during the year. Sometime in the dead of winter, January, February, they come here, they play a game starting at 6, and maybe it doesn't get over until 8:30, 9. And then they're back on the road and they're traveling all the way back up to Red Lake Falls, or vice versa. If you guys are doing it, You're not getting home until 11:30, 12 o'clock p.m.
Easy. A lot of times 1, and then expected to be in school the next day.
Yeah. But that does sort of teach the kids about sort of like, that you still have to get up and show up for work the next day.
No doubt about it.
When I was a young attorney, they used to say, well, you can be out all night with the boys, but the next morning you got to come to work with the men.
Yeah, that is exactly what it is.
It's sort of the same way. When it comes to that, is that there is no excuse because you came home. Sure, you might be a little bit more tired, but you'll get through it. But there's always an expectation that next morning you will be in the class and you will participate.
Right, for sure. And if they aren't in school, then they can't practice the next day. If they don't practice the next day, they don't get to play in the next game.
Right.
So there's definitely consequences for them if they don't come to class.
Sure. And I think it just teaches such a valuable lesson that, life doesn't always happen on our schedules, and life isn't always easy, and we're not always going to be given, the proper amount of rest. And sometimes we just have to kind of, muscle through it.
Absolutely. The other thing is that it shows which kids are committed and which kids are not.
Yeah.
If they aren't committed to doing that, so be it. There's nothing wrong with that, but then don't expect to get to the higher levels.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because no amount of talent that you have is going to be able to get you, all the way to where you can fully realize it unless you put hard work into it.
No doubt. And the other thing is they've got to realize that someday their talent in hockey is not going to fund their life.
Right.
And they're not going to fund their family. The numbers that actually do are so minuscule that it isn't even something that anyone should consider. If it happens, one, you're lucky. Two, you worked hard to get it. Three, you have some natural talent. But most kids, almost all of them, shouldn't even consider it.
Yeah, I mean, and they're just so there shouldn't be any illusions about that. Of course, but then the question becomes, well, why are we trying so hard? Why are we doing that? And I think the answer a lot of times is you say, well, you're doing it for your teammates. You're doing it for your parents, your coaches, the community, and there's just so many other good positive things that can come out of playing hockey aside from just like the dream of making it into the NHL or some pro league around the world.
Well, I don't know of many careers and jobs that you don't have to work as a team. There are very few things that you can go out there and just be an individual and do everything yourself.
Right.
So at some point you have to depend on your teammates, and at some time they have to be able to depend on you. So the teamwork and that kind of thing is something that is lifelong skill that the sports will develop. And the other thing is the lifelong friendships that you develop.
Right. And that's, let's not forget that. I mean, it's so important, the people skills that you learn from playing hockey. I've been mentoring a kid at the high school now who is saying that he wants to be a lawyer. And the first thing that we've gone over as a fundamental is people skills. Before we get to this idea of learning about the U.S. Constitution or anything that actually has to do with the substance of the field of that he's wanting to get into, let's start with figuring out how to treat people well. How to handle people, to get people to like you, things like that. And those things, I think you just learn, they just come naturally as a result of being in organized sports, and especially hockey.
No doubt about it. And I think it gets to my favorite book that I've read is How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That is the book it's so funny you mentioned that because that is the book that I am teaching this kid.
Yep. And that's my favorite book. I think I've read it 5-6 times. And every time I start getting to the point where I feel like I'm not treating the kids with the respect that I need to, then I go back and look through it again and look at my highlighted points and stuff like that. But to me, that was the key to my
Dale Carnegie.
Yep, to my entire coaching career is trying to treat the kids well.
Yep. And yeah, exactly, because that's how you're going to get the most out of them is by giving them that, I think as Carnegie says, like creating in them an eager want.
Correct.
They have to want to achieve, not because you're telling them, hey, this is what I want you to do, but it's getting them to have that same desire.
Right. And it happens too often in sports, not just hockey, but sometimes the parents want it worse than the kids do. Sometimes the coaches want it worse than the kids do.
Yeah.
And we got to keep in mind that the game is about the kids. And if they don't want it bad enough, then we have to find a way to either motivate them to want it, or we have to tone it down a little bit to teach them and allow them to just have fun as a game.
And make their own mistakes to learn.
No doubt.
Yeah. So when did you first decide that you would get serious about coaching as a profession?
It was really my junior year in college. I happened to want to look at coaching, and I really respected my high school coach, which was Steve Romanchuk. I really respected my college coach, and he was Don Olson. And so I started talking to Coach Olson about how I could get involved. And as a junior, he allowed me to work my work study off as the assistant JV coach. Okay. And so I worked with a couple of different guys with the JV team. And then I ended up taking 5 years to graduate instead of 4 because I changed from a business major, which my dad wanted me to get, into an education major, which I wanted to get. And so I stayed that 5th year, and Don made me the assistant varsity coach during my 5th year. straight out of
player coach? Did you?
Nope, my 5th year I didn't,
you didn't have
eligibility,
Okay.
so I was just a coach. And it was different because all the kids were my own age, you know, and things like that. But I just had to stay away from the social part of college because
you're on a different
I'm
level.
on a different set then, a set of rules. And fortunately, I had an athletic director at Tartan that took a chance on me straight out of college and gave me the head coaching job at Tartan. And that's where it all started.
Yeah. So what year was it that you took over the Tartan program?
I graduated in 85, took over Tartan from 85, 86, and 86, 87. And then Don had called me back. Interestingly enough, soccer was my better sport. It was then more so than hockey. So they called me to ask me if I would be the varsity head coach of the soccer team and the assistant hockey coach. And I jumped at it. I mean, it was a dream job to go back to.
Yeah.
We stayed there for 3 years, and my wife was very lonesome. She didn't like the fact that I was gone all the time. You know, between head coach of one sport, assistant coach of another, you're either playing or recruiting 36 weeks a year. And we had 2 children at that time, and she was just lonesome. So she didn't want to stay, and obviously my marriage and my family was more important than a job.
Right.
So I decided to go back to the cities. Just so happens the same athletic director at Tartan was there and heard I was coming back. They had an opening, called me, asked me if I would come back to Tartan. And I did, and I stayed there for 3 more years before I went to South St. Paul.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your coaching philosophy. I read there was an article that was written about you, I think about 2 or 3 years ago when you first got to town. And it said something in there about how you might be more of an offensive-minded coach.
I am definitely more offensive-minded.
What does that mean?
Well, in the olden days, back when we were kids, the saying was, you know, it's better to win 1-0. And if you don't give up any goals, you're not going to lose.
Yep, I've heard that said many times.
And the fact of the matter is, in today's game, the kids are so skilled that you're bound to give up goals. And you can teach anybody to be defensive, but you can't necessarily teach a kid to have the offensive skill and prowess to move forward. So I like to be a high-skilled, high-level, high-speed team. I think that we've accomplished that to some extent here, but we also have a lot more work to do, especially with the younger kids. We're doing power skating stuff with them. The youth program here just made a huge investment for me in a skating treadmill that we will be using to teach the younger kids to skate better and get more power, more speed. But I like to get up and go, and right or wrong, I would rather win 7-5 than 5-2 because I think that we're teaching the kids more skills of the game. This is not the be-all, end-all of hockey. Our goal is to get them to junior hockey, get them to college hockey, and if we just play tough defense, we're not teaching them the skills that we need to move them on to the next level.
Yeah, that's a really practical way to think about it. You know, and especially, like you saw last year, there were a lot of high scoring games, no doubt. I mean, there were records being broken throughout the state. You know, we can talk about the kid on War Road who broke the scoring record comes to mind, but so when it comes to this offensive mindedness and practicing and stuff like that, another one of these old things that I used to hear a lot about was how sort of the North American system was, we're going to scrimmage all the time, and we're not going to be as focused on fundamentals, drills, but especially skating was a big one. That they say that the Europeans and the Russians were always just such better skaters, puck handlers and things like that. Whereas like the North American, meaning Canada, United States, and everything like that, we were known more for grit, toughness, positioning. And then just those, that savvy to be able to get after those loose pucks and just kind of get the puck in the net when it needed to be there. So is that still a thing as far as coaching philosophies are in this country, or not? And then where do you draw the line in terms of those two sort of general approaches?
Sure. Well, first of all, a little history. The reason that the Finns and that the Swedes and the Europeans, Russians especially, were so skill oriented and skating oriented was they play on Olympic sized rinks all over Europe. So they're 200 feet by 100 feet wide. Where here in America, we play on rinks that are 200 feet long by 85 feet wide. Well, the thinner rink causes a more physical game. And so what we found was, early in history of hockey, the U.S. and Canadian game were very physical. A lot of hitting, a lot of tie-ups, like you said, grit, and try to score goals on rebounds and things like that. And it's really the Russians that started the whole thing of skill development. And after the Soviet Union became Russia and became free, some of the ideas that they got came out of Russia as how they were training the kids. Mm-hmm. And that was the first trend. Then the second trend was the Swedes and the Finns and how they were training their kids. And it's now gotten to be worldwide in skill development and more, small area stuff. So the guys got to work with the puck, playing on a big surface with few players, 3-on-3 or something like that. It's not skill developing because there's so few players and so much room that you can do whatever you want. So we've gotten more into developing, the small area game, more cognizant of effective checking, not intimidating checking, not trying to hurt them, not trying to scare them type of thing, and really just pin them off the puck and take the puck away, that kind of stuff. So a lot of that came from the Soviet Union and the Swedes and the Finns.
Mm-hmm. That would probably entail more drilling and things like that. I guess there's so many. I think it was. I heard at some point that Jaromir Jagr had said something about how hockey is just the best game because it requires so many different skills.
Yeah.
And you have to have a certain baseline floor ability at each one of those, being like, skating, shooting, stick handling, passing, checking, getting back on defense, things like that. When it comes to the teaching of the fundamentals, which fundamentals do you feel are the most important for that, the younger player to work on as they approach the varsity level?
Well, the first one obviously is skating. Like when we were young, I didn't let my boys play hockey until they had 3 years of figure skating under their belt. Mm-hmm. So we made our kids figure skate, learn their edges, learn to skate.
There was a woman down in the city. She was like a Swedish gold medal. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I know who I can't think of her name right now, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
And she taught figure skating for hockey players.
Yes, she did.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I took her classes.
You did? Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so did I.
I can't remember who she was. God, that's gonna irk me now.
Yeah. She used to say, and then she, like, even when you're standing on the, after you're done with the skate and everything, she did not ever want you to stand even with all your weight on one leg, because she said that's how a pregnant woman stands.
Yeah,
that's what she said. Funny. And she always wanted to have your weight balanced between both of your legs. Yeah, I'm trying to remember her name, but I remember she had blonde hair and she focused on balance, and you were saying that, keeping your weight distributed evenly between your legs was important.
Yeah, like when we do power skating with the kids, a lot of them like to lift one leg when they're going around corners, mm-hmm. and try to teach them that that's fine if you got nobody on you. But when you only have weight on one foot and somebody bumps you, you're going to fall down.
Right.
You need that weight evenly distributing, so when they do hit you, that they just kind of bounce off and you continue in your path. So the 2 feet is definitely an important thing that they've got to learn when they're doing their skating.
Yep. So, what are some of the biggest differences that you've noticed between coaching at the high school level and the college level? I mean, aside from the obvious recruiting that has to be done for college.
That is by far the biggest.
Yeah.
If you don't have a better team within 3 years, it's your fault.
Right.
Because you have the ability to go get kids. And I get it. You know, like at St. Mary's, we struggled to get kids to come down there at first. A lot of the kids that had played junior hockey didn't want to come to another small town. Mm-hmm. They wanted to be in a major city. So there's some other factors too. But you have the ability to go out and find kids to make your program better.
Yeah.
Whereas in the high school ranks, you basically have your set of kids. You know who that set of kids is going to be 5 years from now by just going down and looking at who the squirts are, you know, who the peewees are.
Sure.
And I think the other thing that is, it's much more of an expectation at high school that I work with the youth program than it was at college. There was really no youth program to work with at college.
Yeah, right. Because it's all about setting the tone from the top down, and that really is the way that a program is going to develop.
No doubt. And I think, like for me, it's really nice because I teach 7th grade. And here in Park Rapids, the middle school and the elementary school are in the same building. Mm-hmm. So when I walk down to the lunchroom, I can say hi to a 3rd grader. I can say hi to a 2nd grader. I can say hi to a 7th grader. I can see the kids that are on the ice in the evening during the day at school. Or if there's an issue where, they're not getting their work done or something like that, I can go down to the elementary school and talk to them and say, hey, we need you to do this. This is what hockey players do.
Yeah, yeah. And so what are you're teaching now also at the high school?
Yep, I teach at the middle school.
The middle school.
I have 7th grade American history, which is new to me.
Yeah.
When I taught at Woodbury and South St. Paul, I mostly taught American government.
Yeah.
And I taught economics. My major in college was economics.
Okay.
So it was a big change to come and teach American history, but everybody's got a little bit of a background in American history, so it didn't take long to catch on and do the things. But I just absolutely love dealing with the 7th graders. They're so much fun, and they're willing to try anything, and it just brings a smile to my face every day going with the 7th graders.
So, when we think about hockey in this state, ultimately we think about the state tournament. Mm-hmm. And of course that's the ultimate goal for any team, from, whatever you want to say, Edina all the way on down to, Park Rapids. Yep. That, not that Park Rapids is as low as you can go, but I'm just saying that, from the big schools to the small schools, everybody's goal is the same, to make it to the state high school hockey tournament. There are so many legends in this state relating to that. A fact I looked up today when I was kind of getting ready for this was that there's only one player who has ever won 4 state titles in this state. And do you know who that is?
It's a guy from Evelyn.
Yes.
Mariucci.
Mayasich is his name.
Is it.
Yeah, John Mayasich. But it's such a rich tradition that we have in the state. And back when I was still in high school, it was before they had gone to the 2-tier system. And I thought one of the coolest parts about the state tournament was the fact that you could have, a final or even just a regular tournament game where it'd be a team like Warroad, against a team like Bloomington Jefferson or something like that.
There was nothing better than sitting at the Civic Center.
The old Civic Center.
Yeah. And, they had 40 sections in there, and 38 sections were for Roseau, and 2 were for Edina, you know? And so that was a blast. And, I was part of the situation when the tournament went from a 1 tier to a tier 2 into an A and AA. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of disagreement among people as to whether they should go to one class, how they were going to break them up, things like that.
Yeah.
But I think all in all, it ended up being perfect because, again, the small school, it was fun to see the small school against the big school.
The David and Goliath.
But
right?
there were so few small schools that could compete with the big schools that it really didn't open it up to a lot of the schools. There were, now the Class A tournament gives many different teams opportunities to get there, and it makes the sectional play much more competitive. And those are the things that kids will remember when they get to be my age.
Yeah. Just thinking back to some of the great programs that I've gone through, I think you said you graduated in 1980, and I think that was sort of in the heyday of Bloomington Jefferson,
Yep.
that the 80s and all the way through the early 90s,
Yep.
that they were really sort of the dominant force in high school hockey.
Yeah, Tom Satterdahl was an amazing coach, and he got the kids to do some really good things. And
that's exactly who I was going to ask you about, was Tom Satterdahl. And have you ever met him before?
Oh yeah. When I served as president of the Coaches Association, Tom was on the board with me, so I know Tom very well.
Yeah. So what are the kinds of things, qualities that Tom had, do you think, that sort of that brought, because I know when he took over at Bloomington Jefferson, I think he was hired on as like the hockey coach and like the tennis coach or something like that, almost like what you're saying, like, the hockey and the soccer coach. And he created such a legendary program that produced, I think it was 4 state titles or something like that. But what is it about, his approach that made him so successful?
I think the one thing that really sticks out in my mind about Tom is his caring for people. His caring for his players, his caring for other coaches. I can't tell you how many times Tom sat with me when I was a young coach, and I bounced ideas off of him, or he would tell me this, or I would ask him questions about this, and he was so willing to help other coaches, and he gave that same love to his players. And I think if you went back and talked to his players right now, you would have a very, very difficult time finding any of his players that had to have one bad thing to say about him. But that love for his players, that caring, along with the fact that he was brilliant in the game, allowed him to build I don't want to call it an empire, but they sure had a good run for an awful long time.
They did. And they produced, I think, more players that have been listed as, like, the top 100 tournament players of all time. Guys like Tom Curvers, I think 1980 graduate, Jay North, Tom Pedersen, Nick Checo, Tony Bianchi. These are some names that will basically never be forgotten in the lore of Minnesota hockey.
I think one thing, if you ask Tom, he'll give some credit to his assistant coaches. Bianchi being one of those assistant coaches that was amazing with kids. So they just had the right touch of caring and discipline and skills, and he's just a tremendous man.
But I like what you said about that. Sort of the first thing that jumped out is being caring about people, because Bloomington was and still is, to a certain extent, a large suburb, and you've got a lot of bodies in that system. But Kennedy also probably had a lot of bodies in their system too. If not the same amount, if not more. So it just goes to show how big of an impact a coach can have on the success and quality of the program. And it was really sort of encouraging to hear you say that it really had to do more with caring about people than just being like a strict hockey mind, which he was, of course, a genius hockey mind. Because you have to get the kids to buy into the system. I don't care how great of a system you've got. If you can't get the kids to buy into it, then it doesn't really matter. It's just a theory, right?
Right. Well, and again, I tell kids this all the time. They don't remember what the score was on December 7th of 2019, but they remember how the coach treated them. They remember the vibe in the locker room. They remember how much fun it was on the bus. I remember one time last year, and I took a picture and sent it to my wife, and I says, "Can you even believe this?" But our guys built a fort in the back of the bus using blankets and hockey bags. I'm like, Hun, I've got 17-year-old kids building a fort on the bus.
Yeah.
And those are the things that they still laugh about today, and the memories are what it's all about, the enjoyment. Again, we talked earlier, it's so hard to make it to the next level, and it's even harder to get to the NHL level, that you got to enjoy the game. And I think that's the big thing I've learned over my 37 years coaching is it's not all about wins and losses.
So, talking about your vision for this program, obviously it's to get to that next level, to succeed, have another winning season. It can be done in a smaller community. We see communities like Warroad, population 1810, Roseau, population 2730, and I think even to a lesser extent, a place like Grand Rapids, which does have an 11,000 population. But those first two I mentioned, of course, are well known for hockey.
Yeah, they're special.
They're special. But it just also kind of goes to show that it can be done. It's not impossible to have such a great tradition. But even a place like Warroad, they haven't won a state championship since 2005, I believe. And then last year, when they had a team you played, where they had those, that one player, Shagabe, who ended up breaking TJ Oshie's record for scoring
for his career.
And they had another player on that team, I think, that was pretty close to being his equal. And they still weren't able to, that game against Matamita, I don't know if you watched it.
I did.
But that was one of the all-time great hockey games that I've ever seen played. But,
absolutely. And I think, both the Warroad coach Jay and the Matamita coaches are good friends of mine. And they're just so good with kids. And again, it goes back to you can be a jerk and be super knowledgeable, and you might win here and there.
Yeah.
But the guys that win consistently are the guys where the players know they care about them.
Yep.
And Jay is amazing in Warroad, and I even at my age, I still look to him, and I try to learn from him as well. None of us know it all. We've been through a lot, but I really respect what he does. And we look at here, and I can't even imagine the pressure that he's under in Warroad because of the high expectations.
Sure.
So it gets back to the same thing that we just talked about. It's about building the relationships and getting the kids to buy in.
So when it comes to developing the youth program too, another thing one of these talking points that always comes up is about how it's difficult to get kids, all kids involved in hockey, even those who want to play. Because whereas if you're talking about the game of basketball or the game of baseball or the game of football, in order to play those games, you really, for basketball, you need is a basketball. You don't even need one. You can borrow. You can just show up at a court and somebody else is going to have one, and you just got to have some sneakers and stuff like that. With hockey, there's a sort of a financial commitment that is involved, starting out at the mite level and even into squirts, and hey, mom and dad, you got to go out and buy a pair of hockey skates. Well, how much is that going to cost? Well, they start at $200 or something. I don't even know how much this stuff costs these days, but I'm assuming it's a lot. Then you got to buy the shin pads. Okay, I guess we're done. Nope, you got to buy the breezers and the socks and then the shoulder. I mean, there's just a lot of gear that has to be bought, and so there's sort of a barrier to entry, and then not to mention all the transportation that's involved.
Yeah, no, a couple things with that. Number one, I would say that everything you just said is very true. But I also say up here at Park Rapids, the youth board is amazing. They have bought all of that gear, put it in a storage room. Kids can check it out. They don't have to pay for it. They just write a check for a rental, deposit, and they get that check back when they return the stuff.
So it's their gear for the year.
And if their skates, if they grow out of the skates, they bring them back and they'll give them another pair. So the youth board here and the youth program has really made it very inexpensive for a kid up here to get started. The problem with hockey is gotten to be the sticks. I mean, the stick right now can run you between $200 and $350 for one stick.
And are they just the one-piece sticks? Or
They're one-piece fiberglass.
So, because I mean, but back in my day, it was an aluminum stick, but then they had the interchangeable blades.
Yep.
But now it's all just
It's all one piece. It's a graphite-based stick, and if you go out there and break it, that's $350 down the tubes.
Wow.
You know, and sometimes it's not even your fault. Some kid comes across, slashes your stick, and it breaks in half. You just lost $350.
Well, I mean, that's what happens. I mean, it's a game of hockey. Sticks break.
Yeah, and so sticks has really become one problem. The other problem has been time commitment, because when you have to drive 3 hours to a game and 3 hours back, you've now dedicated your entire day. And I think that's why the dedication and the commitment level is tougher to get the kids in up in the north than it is in the cities. Yeah. You know, in the cities, you can go and be 15 minutes away from the rink. You're home in, you know, a matter of 2 hours. Right. Here, it's an 8-hour situation.
Yeah. Yeah, you drive from east suburb over to the west suburb. Okay, that took a good half of the day, but I can still go home and have dinner and watch the Vikings game or whatever else it may be. Yeah. Whereas, if it's an 8-hour deal, I mean, it takes that next level of commitment, doesn't it?
When I was at Woodbury, our chief rival was Park of Cottage Grove.
I remember, sure.
Well, we could get from Woodbury's rink to Cottage Grove in 5 minutes.
Yeah. My brother has a house in Newport, actually.
Does he?
So it's kind of like right in between those two areas. Yeah.
And when we were growing up, it's funny. Yeah. It was the Woodbury Newport Hockey Association.
Oh, is that right?
So the Newport kids were with us. But you can go 5 minutes from Woodbury to Cottage Grove, play your game, be back in 5 minutes, and you've really committed about 3 hours to hockey.
Yeah.
Up here, the closest place that we can go is probably DL.
Yeah.
Well, you go to DL and you're 50 minutes there, 50 minutes back.
From Park Rapids. But some of your kids are coming from Walker.
Right, exactly. And so there's definitely some time commitment involved with the parents. And when they have 3, 4 kids, sometimes it's difficult to put that much time into just one kid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you draw your players from, I just mentioned Walker, then also Monaga. Mm-hmm. Is that the same with the youth program too? Is it all sort of a unified youth program so that people from those places are coming to play at the squirt and peewee level too?
The Monaga kids and the Nevis kids are yes. Mm-hmm. The Walker kids are no. They have their own youth program.
Yep.
And eventually they're hoping that they can have their own high school team again.
Sure.
But right now, the kids that play for our high school are Park Rapids, Monaga, Nevis, and then Walker Akeley.
Yep. And he come from LaPorte even, or
they
could,
yeah. But we don't have. I mean, we would have to put into the high school league to add them to the cooperative.
Oh, I got
in order to get them. But we never have because they haven't had any hockey players from there yet.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this team for this year. So the team definitely took a step forward last year, finishing with the record of 14-12-1, mm-hmm. an excellent season by all accounts. And it was really sort of a tale of two seasons in some ways, in that the first part of the season, as we were talking about before, it included a 7-game winning streak. The team slowed a little bit going into the playoffs, but then picked it up again and won some big games at the end of the season, and it even met with some success in the playoffs. You guys are. I had my research showed that you're having 13 returning seniors, but then you also have another senior coming out for hockey this year. So you've got a battle-tested team. The guys, a lot of them were there last year. And I think a big part of that also is the goaltender, in that Sawyer Torkelson mm-hmm. is being a big leader and a great goalie as far as I could tell. I'm
100%.
I'm not an expert by any means, but you could tell that he really stood out, and he's going to be a senior this year. So tell us a little bit about the outlook for this year and kind of how that senior leadership is going to play a role in that.
Sure. Well, let's take it back to last year. And you're right, we started out hot. But last year could have been the most bizarre season I've ever had in my career. With all of the cancellations and the weather and different things that were going on, we ended up from the middle of January till the first week of February, we played 19 games in 30 days. And for a small school that doesn't have the huge numbers, our kids were spent.
Yeah.
You know, by about the seventh game, and you don't get any recovery at all. You're going back and playing the next day. You're playing 3-4 games a week. It made it very challenging. Coming back at the end of the season, we got back on track where we got our ample amount of rest between games. Well, the good news from that is these kids learned what they have to do to recover from, back-to-back games, recover from that. So we're hoping to take that experience to make this season even better. Right now, if what I had yesterday turns out to be the lines that we're going to use, we have 6 seniors on our first 2 lines. Mm-hmm. We have 3 seniors on defense, or 2 seniors on defense. One of them we move forward to see what he could do. If he doesn't work out, we'll move him back to defense. And then again, Sawyer is very good, but mm-hmm. We're very lucky with where we're at. Cale Ravnus is a junior. Yep. Gonna be a tremendous player for us. And then we've got Jaron Pinanimi, yep, who's back from last year, was one of our top scorers as well.
Yep, and he used to play with is it Hillica?
Yep, yeah. Joey Hillica.
They were a lethal combo.
Yeah, and Joshua Hillica is with him now.
Yeah.
And those two play very well together. We got to find a third. Right now we play in Shad Tarola with them, mm-hmm. and Shad has played really well yesterday, so we'll see how that goes. And then with Cale Ravnus, we've got Parker Vingy.
Yes.
And Parker
he came in and made a difference last year as a young player.
Yeah, and he had a great summer. I mm-hmm. tried to find him a place to play junior hockey mm-hmm. After he graduates, so he got some experience and had a great summer with them.
Good.
Trying to find a wing to play with them. We've tried Reed Sharp, who is also a senior. We've got a 9th grader, Finn. Oh man, I'm blanking. But Finn is.
He's a 9th grader, so yeah.
Finn is going to be a tremendous player.
That's great.
And,
yeah.
So he right now he's stronger. He'll be a top 2 line guy for sure as we go on. But he's going to have to really just get some time to get with those kids.
Yeah. You talked about that recovery and, that from back-to-back games and stuff like that. Do you have a nutrition program that goes along with a strength and conditioning program there? We
really don't. And it's one thing I wish we would do. I wish that we would get more kids lifting, mm-hmm. but we have a lifting program at school and a lot of the kids participate in it. One of the problems, and it gets back to what you were talking about earlier, the expensive hockey, a lot of our kids have to work in the summertime.
Yeah.
And they work from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock and can't get to the weight room at 8 o'clock in the morning, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's not as good as I would like, but it is what it is, and we deal with it the best we can. The other thing that makes it really challenging to get kids on a weight program is they're from 4 different schools.
Sure.
Where the Park Rapids basketball team, you get the entire team in the weight room. A kid from Walker's not going to drive 40 minutes to Park Rapids to lift weights for a half an hour, and then go back home.
Yeah.
So
you guys could set up Zoom cameras and
right. Well, the ideal scenario would be to if we ever got a new rink, uh-huh. to have a weight room in the rink.
Oh, wouldn't that be cool?
All of the kids working out there.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. We touched on that. You guys played a tremendous team in Warroad last year, and came up short in that game. What did you as a coaching staff learn from that loss last year, and how do you think that the players who were involved in that game will be able to use that experience to build themselves up this year.
Well, first of all, again, I think in order to look at the loss last year, we got to look at the loss the year before, because we've played War Road 2 years in a row now in sections.
Yep.
The first year we lost 10-0, and they outshot us 77-5 or 77-9, something like that.
Yep.
It was an absolute blowout. We couldn't compete at all with them. Last year they beat us, I think it was 7-0, maybe 8, but shots on goal were 36-12.
Yeah, huge improvement.
Huge improvement. And the biggest thing that I noticed from the first year to last year is they weren't in awe of War Road. The first year we walked in and their eyes were like stars, you know what I mean? And they didn't believe they could win. And last year they knew they could compete. And I think if we can get the opportunity to play them again, I think you'll see another step forward.
Yeah, yeah. So it's all just sort of like facing that, that intimidating presence that is War Road. They wear the black jerseys and everybody's heard of them and all of that. And then so for some of the kids who've gone through and now played them twice, I think are they on the schedule this year? I think
they are not.
They're not on the schedule.
So we'd have to play them in sections.
You'd have to play them in sections again. But even if that's the case, that now they could say, well, we've seen these guys 3 times. There's a way that they can be beat. We played them tough last year, and if we can put the puck in the net at the right time, there's no reason why we couldn't be successful even against a behemoth like War Road.
And I think anyone can win on any given night. And granted, War Road is phenomenal, and I love watching them play.
Hockey Day Minnesota is going to be up there this year.
It is going to be up there.
You planning to be up there or doing?
No, we'll end up playing that day as well, so we'll be somewhere else. But they're a wonderful program, and they deserve all of the accolades that they get. I think that the one thing we need to be able to do to someday get to that level is we've got to get back to playing more challenging teams.
Yeah.
And we've got to get back to playing at higher levels in the youth program. Right now we're playing B-level teams all the way up pretty much, B1 or B2. And at some point we got to get back to playing A-level hockey.
Yeah.
But that's going to come when we get the numbers back up.
Yeah.
So as we can get 2 teams at a level, maybe we can have an A squirt and a B squirt team or something like that. But right now it's about getting the numbers back up so that we can compete.
You talk about challenging teams. One of the challenging teams that you're going to be facing this year is in that first game, December 5th, I believe, right? Against Detroit Lakes. That's a big rivalry, of course, right down the road, 34. We have the Wadena Cup or the Highway 71 Cup against Wadena, which was a great win last year.
Yeah.
Great celebration on ice after that last year. But then you've got out west, you've got Detroit Lakes, bigger town, maybe a bigger program or something like that. What are you looking for from the Panthers in that first game on December 5th?
I guess not being afraid of them. Ben has done a great job with the DL program. They've stepped up and they've been a top 10 team now in the state, and they compete very hard. When we played them at our place, it was a fairly close game, 4-1, 4-2, something of that nature.
Yep.
And then when we played there, it was 8-0. So what we've got to do is believe that we can win, believe that we can play, and come prepared to play.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's been my biggest challenge, is getting these guys to play well on the road. They've played very well in our own rink. We've got to play better on the road.
And that's a mindset, isn't it?
No doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, I know I'm going to do everything I can to be there on the 5th, and it's at 7 p.m. at the Ted O. Johnson Arena. And crowd support, I think, also would be helpful for for the game against Detroit Lakes. I can say that, as a hockey fan, it really enriches my experience, because I do follow the pro game and the college game as well. But I think if you want to be a true hockey fan, especially when you're blessed with living in a place like Minnesota where there's just hockey everywhere, you really have to get into the high school level. And there's nothing like going out and watching a varsity high school hockey game in the state of Minnesota. So I really just want to encourage people from the community to get out and see these games and support the local team.
Yeah, they talk about football, how the crowd can be the 13th man.
Right.
In hockey, the biggest thing is it really can change the momentum, and being that it's a free-flowing game and you don't stop every play and reset and things like that, momentum plays a huge part in a game. Mm-hmm. And when you're not playing as well as you can, the crowd can bring you out of that. When you're playing well, the crowd can make you play better. It's just such atmosphere that makes it fun to play. And our crowds last year were great. I mean, I couldn't ask for more. Hopefully, if we can put a good product on the ice, we'll continue to get those kind of crowds.
Yep. So it's very important that people go to these games. All right. So the last question I have, and it's one that I ask everybody who comes on this. You've already talked a little bit about this when it comes to hockey, but is there any advice that you could give to young people in general when it comes to basically anything? It's an open-ended question.
Yeah, and it's an easy one for me to answer because I talk about it with the kids at school all of the time. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be the best. Mm-hmm. And I think right now, one of my pet peeves up here at the school is the kids would rather be mediocre and blend in with their friends than to stand out and be good. Mm-hmm. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being good. Right. Work at it, do what you need to do. You're gonna enjoy the successes. You're going to hate the failures, but you got to be able to fail and really go after it. But whether it's academics, whether it's athletics, whether it's just being the nicest kid in the school, being the kindest kid in the school, there's nothing wrong with being the best. You don't have to blend in. You don't have to drop your desires to fit in with your friends. Mm-hmm. Be yourself and be good at what you do.
All right. Well, that's great advice, great wisdom. Bill Moore, thank you for being on the Northwestern Voices podcast. And just to remind folks, I'll say it again, that first game is going to be on December 5th at the Ted O. Johnson Arena here in Park Rapids against Detroit Lakes. And that'll be at 7 p.m. and hope to see everybody there. So thank you, Bill Moore.
I appreciate you inviting me.
All right.